Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Adler. On behalf of my colleagues on the board of the City Club of Idaho Falls, let me welcome you to today's presentation featuring State Senator Cherie Buckner-Webb. And our topic today is Reflections of a Black Woman on Life and Race in Idaho and America. We're very excited to present our very distinguished speaker to you as part of our ongoing series examining the vital issues of our time. But before we do that, let me first thank our generous sponsors for their support of the City Club of Idaho Falls, the Idaho National Laboratory, the Bank of Idaho, Floor Idaho, Idaho State University, Idaho Humanities Council, Mountain View Hospital, and KISU-FM. And we want to offer a special thanks to IE Productions for their generous support and offering us the time and talent of their extremely talented staff. Our program is coming to you live from IE Productions here in Idaho Falls. The City Club of Idaho Falls is very excited to present programs that are of particular interest to our community, region, and state. Today's program, as you know, is featured both on Facebook as well as the IE YouTube channel, ieyoutube.com. And after our program is complete, City Club will post our program on our City Club website, which you can find at ifcityclub.com. For those of you new to City Club, let me remind you that, in fact, the City Club is dedicated to the presentation of nonpartisan, non-sectarian programs that will cover the broad landscape of a variety of political, social, cultural, and economic issues of our time. We strive to present a variety of perspectives as a means of trying to promote civil dialogue, which we believe critical to the health and welfare of the Republic. As is customary with the City Club of Idaho Falls, we invite your questions about today's program. And please remember our motto that, as it's been wisely observed, that all we have between us and the total breakdown of civilization is a series of successful conversations. It is in that spirit that we begin our program today as part of our ongoing effort to, in fact, present programs that feature civil discussion. Our speaker today is a very well-known member of the Idaho political community and indeed a well-known figure and face across the state. She is State Senator Cherie Buckner-Webb. Buckner-Webb is, in fact, a fifth-generation Idahoan. Her family arrived in Idaho in 1905, and her great-grandfather, assisted by her great-great-grandfather, built the St. Paul Baptist Church in Boise, which is now the headquarters for the Idaho Black History Museum, which, in fact, Senator Buckner-Webb founded. She is just wrapping up her third term as a state senator. After being elected to the State House in 2010, where she served a single term, she moved on to the State Senate, and she has, as I say, finished her third term. She has chosen not to seek re-election this fall, bringing at least to a temporary conclusion a very distinguished career in the Senate. She is serving as the Assistant Minority Leader. She holds positions on key standing committees, including State Affairs and Education. She serves on a variety of interim committees as well. And Senator Buckner-Webb is, in fact, well known as an activist and an advocate for human rights here in Idaho and across our nation. You should know that when she was elected to the Idaho legislature in 2010, that she became the first African-American member of the legislature. To this date, she remains the only African-American member of the legislature. Senator Buckner-Webb is the founder and principal of Sojourn Coaching, which features organizational development and cross-cultural training. She has a remarkable list of awards and honors that have come her way over her very distinguished career. We could spend the entire session today listing all those awards, but let me just roll out a few for you. She is a recipient of the Idaho Business Review's Woman of the Year. She is a recipient of Hewlett-Packard's Human Rights Award. She is the recipient of numerous other human rights awards throughout the state and nationally. She is the recipient of the Morehouse College Legacy of Peace Award, named for two great peace activists, Dr. Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. Her career has spanned service not only in the public realm, holding governmental positions, but also reflects a considerable career and a distinguished career in some of Idaho's leading corporations, including Boise Cascade, where she worked for some 20 years, and Hewlett-Packard, where she worked for more than 6 years. She also is a very well-known, indeed a renowned jazz singer, a recording artist with singing the blues and gospel music. And were we together today, I'm sure many in the audience would press her into duty to sing a song, which would no doubt delight all of us. But we're not. We apologize that we're not together today, but owing to COVID-19, of course, we all recognize that we are in our separate homes and offices, and the City Club will continue to operate through this virtual forum for the sake of the health and welfare of our community. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, let me say how delighted we are to have you with us today. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to invite our distinguished speaker, my friend, State Senator Cherie Buckner-Webb.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're looking forward to your remarks today, Senator, on your life in Idaho as an African-American woman and as a fifth-generation Idahoan. You no doubt have wonderful stories to share with us about your family's history, growing up in the Boise schools and going on to richly deserve the many honors and awards that have come your way. So we look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to say this is the end of my 10th year in the legislature, and I'm very proud to serve, but I want to own every one of those years that we persevered and stayed in the legislature.
So, Senator, let me ask you to talk a little bit, please, about your early years in Idaho, including some of the formative experiences that shaped your thoughts about life, that perhaps motivated you to become involved in politics. What was your life like as a young black child growing up in the north end of Boise, an area where you still live to this day?
Absolutely. I live 8-9 blocks from where my folks moved when I was a young child. I will tell you that I was a very fortunate African-American woman to be born at the time and place that I was, and that my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents did come long before. And so there was a very small number of blacks in Idaho, and still are, and in Boise Valley. So that I had the opportunity, because they were such kindly folks, to be one of the Buckner girls. And I had some cachet with that, and that they were associated with the church. And some of those things were very helpful to me. I've always been amazed and never gotten a really good answer. They say that my great-grandpa Hardy, God told him to come here and found a church. And my youngest child, when he was 7, said something like, "It had to be God, because I don't think he'd have come here with no black people, Mom." So it had to be God that led them here. My mother's family came here homesteading in the Homedale, Nampa Caldwell area, and they all came together at St. Paul Baptist Church. The Johnsons, that was another side of my grandfather's family. my father's family. My mother's family came here because one sister was moved with her husband to Minidoka, Idaho, as he worked for the railroad. And whenever she met another really nice single man, she wrote home and said, "Sister, come here and meet this guy." And so another sister came, another sister came. So I was surrounded. All that's to say is to say I was surrounded by family. And when you're young, the bosom of a family is a pretty nice place to be. I grew up on Grand Avenue, at least until I was 5 or 6. And Grand Avenue was considered across the tracks at that time. For those of you that aren't familiar with Idaho, if you go down Main Street, you go down Grove Street, you go across where the tracks used to be. They're not there now. Now we're expanding. Simplot's there and others. That was the greatest concentration of Blacks in Boise, although whites still outnumbered us in that area. But it was considered that side of the tracks. My grandfather was retired when I was born, my maternal grandfather. My fraternal grandfather worked as a janitor until we made him stop at 101. He loved doing the work, and he lived a block from the church so he could go in and help take care of the church for a long time. Growing up here was an amazing experience. When we did move at age 5 from next door to my grandparents in the bosom of all my relatives in River Street, we moved to 1012 North 19th Street. We'd been there for about a year. I noticed that it took us a long time to get into a house because my mom and dad were always going to look for a house, looking for a house. Didn't work out. After we'd been there for a year, we were sitting at dinner one night, and my mom, for no reason, we weren't even supposed to get up from the table at dinner unless somebody was dying. For whatever reason, got up from the table, went to the front door, opened the door, and saw a fire that she thought was in the neighbor's house across the street. So it turns out it was a reflection of a fire in our front yard. My father went to the rescue, of course, put out the flower, and it was a cross burned in our front yard. Not knowing the significance of it, I know that my mom was really, really angry, and my father was just gathering us all together, and they were calling our families to come and get us and things like that. My mom insisted, though, that my father not put it in the alley or hide it away. She used very colorful language and said, "The silly somethings. We've been here a year. They're late. They're not running us off." And that was in the era where there were still, well, there even are some still now, there were restricted covenants in certain areas. And even if there wasn't a restricted covenant, there were neighborhoods that did not want Blacks to infiltrate, if you will. But my mother decided we were there for the stay, in spite of what her sisters and brothers and mom and dad said, "Come on back. We want our children safe." She stayed the course, and we had a wonderful life on 19th Street. We had wonderful neighbors. We had really a good time. We had neighbors that really put their arms around us, not with one of those pity things, but that tell me more. Does this happen very often? But stood with us and stood for us. I guess I would interject in standing with and standing for. I was so edified to hear what happened in Idaho Falls when 400 people stood together shortly after Martin Luther King Day. Black, white, Latino, people from every walk of life. That's what it's talking about, being an upstander or standing in support of others. It's visible support. So I really applaud you. I was very emotional at hearing it because we were having kind of a rough time here in Boise. So good for you. Tell me if I'm going too long. You'll hit me up, huh?
No, you take all the time you'd like, please. We're enjoying this.
An interesting thing about the cross, I'm going to keep going back and forth. My first day in the Senate, I'd already been in the House for 2 years. A wonderful gentleman who was very, very tall, white guy stood up. And everybody kept telling me, "You need to be careful. Don't be in your office with your door closed because you're a woman and because you're a Black woman and we don't know what's going to happen." These are my friends and family. Very tall man came and he said, "I'm going to close the door. I need to talk to you." Very powerful. Close the door. And for a moment, my heart pattered. And he said, "Do you have any recollection of a cross being burned in your front yard?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And my fear was going to be he was going to announce he was the guy. But the truth of the matter was his brother was the police officer that investigated it. And by George, they lived not far from my grandparents at 820 East Bannock. And he told the story of the lengths that they went to discover who did it. We never heard this part, but who did it. And they encouraged them to find a home outside of Boise. That was an interesting thing all those years later. So that must have been 45 years later or longer for that came to me. And then later, just as I had announced that I was leaving the legislature, another brother of the policeman and the man that came to talk to me, it's their story to tell, so I'm not giving you their names right now, came to me and said, "Those are my brothers. We're good guys. We knew your dad and we loved your family. And it's just really interesting how people demonstrated, even anonymously, that they were supportive. 19th Street, lived there a long, long time, grew up, got married, left for some years with a husband in the military, came home, got divorced, moved to 23rd and Bella, which is 9 blocks from my home. The night my children and I moved in, because we did lots of work to the house before we moved in, left my car that was hardly running in the front yard. Not in the front yard. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. At the curb in the front yard where it belongs. We weren't messing up the neighborhood. Got up in the morning. My sister's knocking on the door. Where's your car? I was going to take your car to get it fixed. My car's right in front, Pepper. It's not there, Cherie. I stepped outside and my car was gone. We ultimately called the police, and there's a hill that Mr. Simplot had built a really lovely home above Harrison Boulevard, way up on a hill. Somebody had taken my car and run it off a hill just below his house. 9 blocks. I kept saying, they are so confused. We've been here since the beginning. I don't know who they think they're running off. We're here to say this isn't happening. Didn't make me mad, didn't make me scared, but I did have 2 small children, and it did cause me pause. So we did take some precautions with that. I had great teachers in school. I had friends that I have today. Ironically, some of my best friends from first grade were friends with my father in school. That's an unusual circumstance for Blacks in Idaho. Some of the stereotypes that persist, like white, bright, and almost white, are some of the things that are vestiges from slavery that still exist in our communities all over the world. My experience was totally different than my first cousin, if you will, who was not as pale as I, who walked a different walk, who remained in River Street, and stereotypes were placed on her that I didn't get. And it was unfortunate, because I found myself saying, do you know that's my cousin? Oftentimes, that's my cousin you're messing with. Don't do that. And that's unfortunate. So those kinds of things are pervasive that still remain. We find when African Americans apply for jobs, the more Anglo they present, it seems to be, even though we're looking for affirmative action in EEO and purportedly to get the most experienced people we can find, we find that oftentimes the more Anglo they present, the better. The more Anglo they present. And I found that in my work life. I tend to be a woman, in every job I've ever had, somebody's made a sign for me that says cut to the chase, because that's kind of the way I operate. If you've got something to tell me, hone it before you get to me, because I want to say cut to the chase. And it didn't always serve me well. That's kind of a masculine trait, some people thought, and that wasn't appropriate. I should be grateful to be in that position and be grateful to take the time to talk. And some of those things permeated throughout my school time, throughout my corporate time. But in spite of that, and probably because my mother's credo to us was, you're a Black child. And this is the same thing I said to my children. This is the same thing my children are saying to my granddaughter. You're a Black child. You must try harder. You must do better to be considered half as worthy. Used to really, my boys were really angry about that. I mean, angry. They thought that was so much bull. They already knew they were smart. They were this and that, gifted and talented. But no, she said, you have to be the package to get the same opportunities. I will tell you that I tell young African-American men and women today the same thing. And that's unfortunate. You got to get them, you've got to get in to show them what you've got. And once you got in, you've got to walk that line. One of the things that I found in my life as an older woman that I realized consciously, because it was unconscious before, that I spent a lot of time making people feel comfortable. When someone would ask me a question, when my mind's going, are you kidding me? I would say, is that so? Please tell me more, which is really anathema to who I am. And I probably spent a lot of time eating a lot of junk food when I got home as a result. We all cope the best way we can. But that it's not that you shouldn't be polite or professional, but spending all your time reinforcing behaviors that encourage white folks, for example, to treat you in a differential way than they do their own. So some of that I guess I'm trying to get to the point, and this is the language I use. I want to begin a whole bunch, I have begun and want to encourage others I interact with to start a tsunami of truth telling, telling each other the truth. What works, what doesn't work, what's uncomfortable, realizing we have to operate in a society in a lot of ways are like, but understand that my way of getting to that may be a little different. There's a lot of similarity and difference, and there's a lot of difference and similarity. That's one of the really important things that I've learned in my time growing up in Idaho. I have a consultancy, and whenever I leave Idaho, wherever I'm speaking, and I stand up or somebody introduces me and says, and this is Cherie Buckner Webb from Boise, Idaho. I don't know who's more shocked, Black folks or white folks, because people still don't think we live out here. I mean, white folks are always going, oh my God, how did you get there? Why did you stayed? You're still staying? And it's just very interesting. I didn't know none of you folks were out that way. It's one of the things that's the reality of us, of being here. When I was a youngster, even as a teen, I was part of NAACP. I started the youth branch of the NAACP in Boise. My mother was an active person, and my father moderately accurate in NAACP. There was a Citizens for Civic Unity that were having listening sessions and things that we're still trying to get to do today or need to do today. There are lots of layers for Black people in Idaho and elsewhere that deal with historical trauma. And some of the thing is the lack of confidence in their white colleagues, trusting, have to do with hundreds and hundreds of years of being treated differently or less than. And it's not because they're not capable and competent, but we are weary to believe that you're going to come through with what you tell us you will. Layer that with a woman, and we know what the percentages tell us about women, no matter how educated, no matter where they are, that often in a workplace they're started at a lower wage, that they continue to make a lesser percentage. So you get a little suspect about a lot of things, and you add the layer of race onto it, it goes on. Not everyone has the same experience that I do, but I will say to a great number, many have realized these things, and it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult. And I don't think sometimes we try to take it for granted, and sometimes you just get tired. You get tired of being sick and tired. Wouldn't live anywhere else in the world. Don't want to live anyplace else. Has lived a number of other places, but always come back to Boise. It's really critically important for me. When I was a child, my mom pushed me to run for office, and I always gave eloquent speeches. I remember my junior year in high school, Christy Guernsey was one of my best friends, and her mother was a longtime legislator, and Christy was running for something too. We were juniors, and she said, you can't run for student body president when you're a junior. And I thought, why not? There's nothing on the books that says you can't. And so we were sitting around working diligently on our speeches. And you know how people create these diatribes that go on and on. And mine ultimately was, hello, I'm Cherie Buckner. I'm running for student body treasurer. Yes, I'm a junior, but I have great qualifications. I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So the key competency, the key thing, the thing to my advantage was they remembered which one of the 50 people I was, because I was the only Black person up there. And I think maybe some of that running for office in the legislature, they never had to figure out which one I was. They remembered. Not many came knocking to their door. Not many Black folks. Those times of running for office as a child and being in Y teens, which was part of the WCA, was the YWCA in that day. My mother's pushing and shoving are lots of reasons I chose to run for office. She firmly believed, as did my father, that you have to be a part of the action. You have to study. You have to know what you're voting for. You have to show up to vote. Apathy is not an option, and you have to try to get others to come along with you. And it's so deeply ingrained in me, I don't think I had a second thought to do it. So when the time came, I found out later I didn't go through all the rituals that most people do of asking everybody, should you, and going to the party and not doing those things. I wouldn't recommend that people do that now. There is a process, and process does matter. Excuse me, I was attending a film that Sonia Rosario had created, and it was about a Native American woman in northern Idaho that waged war against the United States government with a fly swatter. And I was to do the invocation. I did the invocation. I talked to her and she said, little sister, there's work to do and you have to make a decision today. Pardon me. Didn't realize it was the day you need to, the last night before you had to apply to run for office. And I was so touched by her, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing that not knowing that I was considering even running for office. I had only talked to folks when they brought to me names of people they were considering. They didn't ask me. I submitted my name and I ran as hard as I could run. And I was fortunate enough to win. I make light of standing out a little bit, but I think I expected a hard run and prepared myself to do it. So one of the things that comes from my childhood is to work harder than the next, if that's what it takes to get it done, whatever it is. And I believe that's important and critically important. We owe it to our constituencies, we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to others. I'm trying to decide where to go next, because I may be just putting you to sleep. I love to see people. This is really hard for me because I can read you if you're in front of me. Dr. Adler, help me.
You don't need any help, my friend. You have been terrific, and we're all wanting to hear more and more from you. I take note of a fascinating childhood and early life and indeed an adult life in Idaho that you describe, but it was marked with traumatic moments and some very grave challenges and even dangers. Let's go back to the cross burning for a moment, because Americans are well aware of the threats.
The symbolism.
Yes, the symbolism, the threats posed to African American families, among others, by the KKK in acts of cross burning. Let's go back to that evening. You were at dinner. You were a first grader, I believe, and you were unaware of the cross burning. After that happened, and after your father put out the fire and displayed the cross on your front porch, what was the discussion like in your house? Did you then wonder why would somebody do that?
I did ask the question. My mother was the one with the teachable moments. She talked about in our history as Black people that we were not valued. Matter of fact, we weren't considered people for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. She didn't go into Juneteenth and all that, but she said we were a utility. We were equipment that helped build this country, but we were disposable, that we were, and she talked about people used to put people on crosses, but more often people were hung, and it was a celebration. And she showed us pictures, even at that time, at that young age. I mean, she was pretty good at monitoring what pictures she showed. She talked about it and showed the crowd, men and women and children but she didn't show the actual lynching. She didn't actually show that, but she had said that it was a vestige of a group of people, that they used the cross as saying, as validating what they were doing. There was some purported convolution of what was good Christian work and what was the work of those that were doing the cross burning at the time. There was lots of talk, and she made sure that stayed in our minds. Not just that single incident, but my mom routinely brought us more and more into the understanding of what the road for Blacks had been in the United States. When I was at 17, a gentleman named Paul Bellison lived in Nampa Caldwell, and he was a janitor at a school. And he wrote a letter to the KKK and said he'd like to join. That he wrote, a wonderful letter, because members of the KKK came to Idaho, went to his house, knocked on the door, his little black white door, and I guess they thought she must work for him. Sent him to the school. They went to school, and when they saw a very big Black man say, "Yeah, I'm Paul Bellison, and yeah, I wrote the letter," talk about embarrassment. Needless to say, they rescinded the offer. But as a result of it, Mr. Bellison and my mom did a series of things on college campuses across the Northwest, and I got to go with them. I mean, some of the things they wrote were a conversation with somebody calling Citizen Bellison, Citizen this, and what it looks like when we're calling to say I'm signing up for the KKK, and how eager they were to have somebody in our area, but didn't do their due diligence. And shortly after that, Watts had burnt. Watts was burning. So there's a song, I'll never forget my life. WATTS is my hometown. My mother wrote it. We want to go back, but the damn fools burned it down. Sorry if it hurts your sensibilities. Burn, 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 little city. Mr. Bellison played the piano. Mama did the narrative, and I did the singing. It was really an interesting thing and a significant addition to my understanding of what was going on across the country with regard to African Americans in Idaho. And Idaho was always reflective of what was going on elsewhere. When the civil rights marches came, I remember that many people don't remember that Dr. Martin Luther King started the march once. They got so far, and then he turned back. And it was for good reason, because we didn't know it at the time, but they were going to be set upon by folks. He had a feeling. He said he had a premonition, and actually he might have used words that were much more godly, that this was time to turn back, not give up, but turn back. And then later, when the March on Washington came, it was such a day I'll never forget it. My life, I cry every time. After his death here in Idaho, this small number of Blacks wanted to have a citizen, let's see, what was his name, Governor Samuelson, fly the flag at half staff, and he refused. Oh my God, Jack Murphy, I believe, was the lieutenant governor who ultimately gave the okay to do it, and while Governor Samuelson was out of town. So we did have like our first civil rights march on the steps of the Capitol. It was small attendance, Black people all over the city that were working as day workers, cleaning people's house. No matter what they were doing, they were told by their employers they would lose their job as they went. There were young men that were in our choir at church that served at Mountain Home Air Force Base. They were told they were not to get involved in those kinds of issues. They took their uniforms off and they still came. And I'm feeling very proud to have been part of that moment in the state of Idaho. We have had our own moments of triumph and continue to have moments of distress. But we persevere, and we persevere because there are wonderful people standing with us, beside us, not doing the work for us, but working with us. And that's what's necessary in times like these, and definitely in times like these.
Mm-hmm. And so, Senator, when you talk about these formative moments and influences in your early life, ranging from the cross burning on your own lawn to the refusal of Governor Samuelson to fly flags at half-mast, combining that with what your mother, Dorothy, told you, that as a Black child, indeed as an African-American, you're viewed as disposable, something less than worthy. Yes. For so many people, those events, that kind of a reminder could be daunting, could impose on a young child something of an inferiority complex, as the Supreme Court itself would say. You seem not to have developed that. Instead, it energized you and motivated you. How would you explain that to our audience, that you were animated and motivated?
Again, I would say I was the most blessed child in the world. I had a father that was a jock at Boise State. Everybody knew Old Buck, and he repaired cars, and he had a good reputation. And he was not one of those people that would confront very much. His mom and dad had lived forever. His grandparents had lived here forever. His other grandparents had lived forever. So I guess we had shown up as okay colored folks. So I didn't have to dispel a bunch of myths or establish myself so much as maybe some would have. But when I'm alone out on the street, nobody knows to whom I belong. So I think what they did is instill in me, a lot of it had to do with faith connection. You know, you're called upon to do certain work. You must stand up, you must show up, you must speak up. Sometimes you have to shut up. That was one of my greatest challenges. And then there'll be times that I have to make up and then re-up, go back to the Father and look up, keep looking up. And that's the kind of stuff they instilled with me every single day of my life, and all in different ways. My grandpa Johnson ran a hawk shop out of his house, and he had 5,000 guns in there. I was always never supposed to go in Grandpa's house unless he moved his guns first. And I didn't want to bother Grandpa, so I'd move them into the drawer for him. So I knew about lots of different things, but it was that family. And now for me, as young people come to town in particular, I have so many children. I have 2 biological children, but I have lots of children by choice, family by choice. And that's what we've done as African Americans, because we often didn't know who our family was, but we're being purposeful. And they're not all black. They're black and white, and we're making families, and we're sharing the lessons by choice. We're not sitting down like this, but we're talking about what we've done. When we came to the Black History Museum, the church was about to be sold that I was attending, and it was barely standing. It was on 820 East Bannock, and my grandmother kept saying, don't let him get rid of the Black History Museum. And lo and behold, the wonderful family that owns Atavala joined with me, Pete Peterson, and said, let's see what we can do. Well, the biggest challenge was, well, a couple, how to move it, how to pay for it, and where to put it. And he was the one that came with the idea of approaching Julia Davis Park. And let me tell you, at that time, they said, we have no green space, you can't do it. And we kept giving him all the figures and thoughts. That didn't do it. But what we did, we went in front of their committee and we took our history and what that church signifies. We shared music, we shared history. I don't mean history in a stand-up history. We did poetry. We talked about people, we talked about triumph, and they voted in our presence to let us move it into the park. Then the money was the hard thing. And then again, our community stepped up and stepped out. We were going to have it raised in a very short time. It didn't work. Mr. Bisterfeld, Vernon Bisterfeld, was a county commissioner, and he let us put it on county land for it's supposed to be, it's to a year. I think it took us 2.5 years to raise the money. And it's another God thing that kind of showed up. I don't want to be sappy, but this is the truth. And all that time, that's when church burnings were going on all over the United States. Some of you may remember that. The church was never touched. Never touched. We found one little group of cats that had gotten in there, and that's it. St. Luke's Hospital was doing some building, and they put lights that shone on the property, on and on again. I mean, if you ask not, the answer is no. And so we asked and we received, and we worked ourselves, and people worked with us and for us. And sometimes we have to demonstrate that it is valuable, because people don't know what they don't know. You've heard me say that before. So, but building that building, seeing it sitting on stilts for 2 years, and then watching, at that time, what's the movie? I didn't go to the movie. Please don't tell him. And it took a moving company that made you seem like you're on the ship. A real romantic movie. It was a big deal. I can't think what it was. Titanic. Somebody from Boise did all the special effects, went to California with it. He said, I'll move your church. I'll do it for free. He moved it, let us use his stilts for all that time. Didn't charge me, moved it the next time. He had retired. His son had the business. He said, I'm rolling this baby over to St. Luke. I'm over to Julia Davis Park. He jumped in that truck. And I mean, it was like blocks, but you should have seen him. It just went like clockwork. It was an amazing, amazing day. And we saw people from every walk of life, from every hue, from communities outside Boise coming to support it with us. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. That was a big day in my life. That was a big day in my life. So you can imagine when I say it's kind of scary in the last couple of days, some of the information we got with folks that were going to come to talk about the rally that was going to occur in Boise this week, talked about eliminating the Black History Museum. So we were on our P's and Q's for a couple of days, trying to be careful and watching what was going on. So yeah. I've never had a dull moment. I don't think I've had a dull moment. And I like it. And a challenge doesn't frighten me. And my children are almost fearless. My granddaughter's probably the most fearless. But I keep telling them it's wise to be cautious. And it's wise to call on your elders. And it's wise to know your neighbors and to share with them and to listen to their stories, because they have stories of triumph and tragedy and things that we need to know about each other. It's that connecting. That probably has made me feel strong enough to risk and reap some amazing rewards.
Senator, this your review of your experiences as a young woman growing up remind me, of course, that you've been able to deal pretty effectively with the racism that you faced firsthand as a child, but it also continued to some degree as you entered your working life and when you were working for a very large timber company, as I recall, and you went up north to Council, Idaho. As I understand it, you dealt with racism within the company. Would you share that story with us, please?
I'd be glad to. I was responsible for Cascade Council, Horseshoe Bend, and Emmett. And my first day on the job, one of the things they wanted to do was to help me understand the timber industry, because of course I'd never been into it. And so a wonderful, wonderful man, Jim Hughes, I love him to this day, was the manager at the council plant. And so he took me out to see, the trees are here, they're cut, and they're brought in on these huge trucks. Amazing. I mean, it was just so amazing because he's been in the business for a long time. And this is where we make the next cut. And this is where they get on the conveyor. And then we went inside where the Sawyer's seat is, the man that actually, everything is technical now, where they decide where's the best value proposition, where's the value cut. And I noticed the guy sitting in front of me cutting the stuff. All of a sudden his ears turned red because I was that close to him. Then his neck turned red. And then I heard Jim start to kind of stutter. And I said, what? And he goes, I think we need to go in my office. And this is mid-tour, right? So we get down, we go in there. And he said, I don't know how else to tell you this. And it's no disrespect. I just have to tell you. The next thing that happened is the cant goes to the nigger. Really? The nigger. And he said, and I said, and what does the nigger do? Well, it turns the log. We'll be calling it a log turner if you'd like any service on this machine from now on. We're going to have to change it. But really realizing that the vernacular of that environment, it was called the nigger. Now let's think about it. Nigger was equipment. If we talk about from the earliest days of blacks being in the United States, if we talk about expendable, it was like a piece of equipment. They called it the nigger, but I did say, we'll be calling it the log turner. I don't know what they called it when I was gone, but when they called me up to ask for parts, they called it the log turner and the right part number.
Yeah, that's quite a story, and it reflects, of course, the status of racism in that day, and to a degree, I imagine, the status of racism today. But it raises, Senator, a wonderful question from one of our audience members that helps to turn our attention to what many regard as a racial transformation here in the United States, a reckoning, a moment when people are perhaps not only giving more thought to remedying the problem of systemic and institutional racism, but wanting to live a better life. And so one of our audience members asked this question: as a white person, I would like to do better, and my white friends would like to do more. What advice can you give to us as to what we might do to combat racism?
One of the things that I think that's the first step is that we all have racist tendencies, and you may have been racist in some environments. And what we're trying to do to some degree is to whitewash our history. I'm talking about all of it. We're seeing people, let's tear down this, let's do that, let's do whatever it is. First of all, we have to own our history with blacks in the United States. Yes, we did treat them differentially. Yes, we did not regard them as people. Yes, we did not give them certain opportunities. And even today in our schools, if you put two kids together, white and black, and one demonstrates a little more aggressive attitude, and it may be because that kid is more aggressive, or they're bored stiff, or they're smarter than you think they are, we attribute negative values often to black kids. And that's been our conditioning. And I think the first important thing is to try to be conscious of what you're doing. If you walk down the street, you see somebody with a boom to boom to boom, before you see them, you're thinking, what are you thinking? Are you thinking that's probably some black kid? Or when you see that it is a black kid, realize that you also see a white kid next to him doing the same thing, and not to put a negative value judgment on that. To become conscious is one of the first things that we need to do. And what can you do? Make an effort to get to know someone not like you. And you may not like them. And then try again and again and again. Because you don't learn more by just reading about it. Reading's great. People can give you 50 books. You read them and read them and read them, and you still act the exact same way. But you know what's right or wrong. And I even say that to my own folks, because our folks have our reticence to get engaged with white folks for fear of what will happen to them. There's so many things we can do. And I was just asking, as I was meeting with another company just a few days ago, I say, to the gentleman that asked me, he was responsible for, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people. I think a group over a couple thousand people. He was high level, highly educated. highly paid. And I said, what do you do well? I mean, you know what to do in that situation. So do what you do. I say, if you're the best baker in the neighborhood and you meet somebody in the neighborhood, bake a cake or ask about how to do it. But I mean, you know how to be humane to other human beings. It always amazes me that somebody can be so loving to a puppy or a kitty or a bird or something, but wouldn't extend the same kind of kindness to a person that looks different to them than them.
That's
Get educated, get acquainted, have a conversation, take a risk. And when you blow it, say, I just blew that because I didn't know what I was supposed to say to you. And here's one that people kill me. I don't know what to call you. Or they never, here's in the last week of the legislature, I was doing this license plate I was bringing. It was called Too Great to Hate. And I thought, this is something that we can all come together and agree on. Boy, was I confused. It didn't pass. But as I was talking about it and I was saying, how difference and we all came here for this reason or that and da da da. And after, I can't tell you, a number of people came up to me, Cherie, I don't think of you as Black. And I go, how can that be? You got eyes, you're blessed, you have the gift of sight. How can you not think of me as Black? And they go, well, I thought that would insult you. No, I like it. That's who I am. See me in the wholeness of who I am. When we have somebody come from another country, if it's a country that's one of our respected countries, you say, well, that person's whatever they're from. And you don't say it as a pejorative, it's not negative. So think of when you're talking to Black people, we know we're Black. We're looking at them, that's a Black girl right there. We know that. It is not negative to acknowledge who we are. I've been in circumstances when you had to go find somebody in a meeting room and people have told me there's like 50 people there and they say, go find John, he has a green shirt on. Well, there are a whole bunch of people with green shirts. If they said he's the one and only Black guy there in a green shirt, they'd have had it. It's more than a descriptor, but it's the wholeness of who we are. We're well aware that we are Black. And some people use different, some like African-American, some like what. And if you call me African-American, I don't like it, I'll say, would you call me Black or whatever? I mean, it's okay. It's okay. I know white people that don't like to be called white people. So we have started saying mainstream dominant culture. And what the heck does that mean? Because many of us are part of mainstream dominant culture. But to be corrected doesn't mean that you were wrong in what you were saying to that person. Take risks. That's what I say. Take risks. And again, that wonderful display, I don't know who went and who didn't in Idaho Falls, spoke volumes not only to white folks, but to Black folks, to Native American folks, to folks from other countries. It spoke volumes about the community in which they live.
Wow. Thank you, Senator. Let's turn our attention for a few moments to the fact of protests which are occurring throughout Idaho, have occurred here in Idaho Falls, in Boise and elsewhere, and across America. We have a couple of audience members who wonder about your reaction to these protests, particularly from the standpoint of how you would describe proper conduct or appropriate conduct in a peaceful protest. And has anything about these protests surprised you?
I've been surprised at the level of, oh my gosh, anger and vicious things that have happened. I've not seen that before in protest. Well, one of the things I would say is leave your guns at home. I know that we're an open carry state, but don't do it. I say that check your intention in going to a protest. Make sure you know what the hell it is you're protesting, because I asked 4 out of 5 people that have been at a couple of them, they go, I just knew it was a protest and it was going to be, and I'm going to go. Check it out. You may not agree, and ask some good questions. And I say there's a whole difference between a protest or an assembly or to state your piece. It doesn't necessarily, some of these things that people are calling a protest are not a protest. They are saying, I'm somebody and I want you to see me, hear me, and know me. But the last few here in Boise have been a little bit frightening because they did result in some violence. And I hope that that's the end of that. I hope we've got it under control. But know what it stands for. If you have any idea of who is leading it, that would be a good thing to do. Well, now that we have things like Facebook, we can find out a lot of information online. I've asked questions. One of the things that happened here, folks were talking about Black Lives Matter. I hope I didn't say this earlier. Well, I believe Black Lives Matter. I do. A lot of people do. But there was some confusion of whether Black Lives Matter, which is an entity that is present across the United States, and in every entity, there are factions that are more outspoken or maybe more radical than others. But there was not a Black Lives Matter faction that was leading this. There were a group of people that came to do it. And on both sides of the aisle, the fracas that happened on Tuesday, there were folks that came because they wanted to support the police, and there's the people that came that wanted to see Black folks out of the way talking about stuff they didn't know, and there were Black folks that came to say, uh, um, I do or don't support the police, or this is what I'd like to see that's different. I mean, folks don't get clarity. You know, you get a snippet, you get one line, and you say that's what's making me do it. But I think the important thing is for you, particularly as individuals, to make sure you know what you're doing and why you're there. I mean, I could see me, especially as we're trying to decide about when we go back to school. That's an issue that a lot of people could get on, but we're not looking for violence. Violence doesn't get you anything in the long run.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm reminded that the late John Lewis referred to Black Lives Matter as a continuation of the civil rights struggles of the 1960s, in which he joined Dr. King to fight racial injustice.
Yes.
Do you share that view of the late great John Lewis?
I would say that Black Lives Matter, I don't know, because I am loath to get, because they have said they do have actual charters. I haven't seen their charter. I haven't seen what they do. But I see people aligned from all walks of lives. It doesn't have to be one group or the other, but they can align together for a common good, no matter what their charter is. Nobody was asking the folks that walked with Dr. King exactly where they came from. We were assuming that they were looking for the rights of all human beings to be treated fairly. That's what we assumed. And we would hope that would be the case. I would say that a lot of people that talk about Black Lives Matter, including myself, say, and some people say, why do you say Black Lives Matter? All lives matter. Again, let's go to the historical picture. When we landed here, not of our own volition, we were not people. We were not treated like people. We were cattle and less than cattle. And it took a period of time before we were even 3/4 of a person. And then that was eliminated. I mean, if you go to your history. And then there was a period of time when we finally got to be able to vote, but the word didn't get across the United States for a long, long time, so we didn't know. And then you realize that right now, there's all kinds of gerrymandering and things that voter suppression, that even though we supposedly have this right, we can't get the job done because we're not allowed to do it. So we have to think about what we're doing and what the impact of our presence is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As our time winds down now, Senator, I'm sad that it's gone by so quickly. Let's try to squeeze in a couple of other questions, please. It's well known that the state of Idaho lacks diversity. Our racial demographics indicate something like 90% of the state is white, maybe 1% African American, the rest a combination of Hispanic, Native American, and other groups. Why do you suppose that Idaho lacks diversity?
I think one of the things people want to know, if there's none of my kind, how am I going to be treated now that we have the ability to be more mobile? The other thing, it's the economic picture. Yes, we're looking really good in Boise and a couple of places, but do you have the ability to not only hire me, but will you welcome me with regard to housing? Will there be social and educational opportunities for me that will feed my spirit and my personhood? For example, Boise State was doing really great. Then this last year we had this thing about, are you going to use money from the state to fund diversity programs? I think there's really good rationale in doing that, but we were shutting that stuff down. We got to think about what we're doing. Our school budgets, we're way underfunded. What does that mean? So why, when you're already in a place that's questionable, would you come to another, particularly as a person of color, a person outside the mainstream dominant culture, and expect to flourish?
Thank you. Senator, a lot of people wonder, a lot of parents wonder, what kind of advice could we offer to our children about what they might say to members of groups that are underrepresented to help them feel a little more comfortable and perhaps at ease here in our society? Any recommendations along those lines?
Let me be sure. You mean a kid speaking to another kid?
Well,
Is that what I understand?
Yeah, what might we say to children as to how they can make their classmates and friends a little more comfortable in our society, particularly here in Idaho, given our racial demographics?
Same thing, include them. Can you want to be on my team? And if they suck, then you say, I would ask you back, but you got to get better. But I mean, just be real, treat them like they do their other friends. And they are unique and different. And maybe their hair is different. And maybe they're reticent. And maybe they come from another country and they don't play the same things that you play. Say, let me teach you. I mean, it's the same thing you do to somebody that's new to a school or new to your environment. It's reaching out and making it possible. I don't mean you have to fix them, feed them, hand feed them with a spoon or whatever, but welcome them. Acknowledge their presence. Acknowledge they're different. Somebody say, what do you do if they're Black and they've never seen you Black? Say, hey, your skin's Black. What's that about? And they go, my mom, my dad, and my grandma's Black. I mean, kids are really much better at it than we are. They're really factual. Kids get it, but encourage them to be humane. Invite them. Don't be afraid.
Thank you very much. So as you wrap up your distinguished career in the Idaho State Senate, where as an African-American woman, a minority, a Democrat, you were obviously a minority within a minority. I'm wondering, as you recognize that status and you go forth to continue your activism and your advocacy for equity, for which you are a zealot, what do you anticipate doing now in the days ahead?
Well, I have a list that won't quit. I'm not tired yet. Let me tell you, I'm not tired yet. I tend to, like I said, still be a part of a mighty militia that's compassionate and an emissary for equity, an ambassador for humanity as a whole, and a zealot for liberty and a warrior for justice. That's not going away. And the reason is I'm undergirded. I'm not only drawn to that, but I'm undergirded by the understanding of how connected we are and the inheritance that I have from courageous leaders known to me individually and those from afar. And I'm supported by committed men and women across difference. There's a whole cadre of wonderful people. We call out the ones that are a pain in the butt, but there are a lot of people that lift me up over and over again. And I owe a debt of gratitude for those who made a way for me. A host of people that have powerful histories of striving to ensure that I could get into the Idaho Senate. And my faith is the other thing that's just huge. And then I'm also empowered by a vision for the future that is ever greater than we are now. I'm not knocking where we've been. There've been some bad spots, but I really believe that the next generation, and not just the next generation. One of the things I love from my Native American folks and Indigenous people, they don't talk about the future being next week, next month, next generation. They're talking about for 7 generations and generations following that. And we are responsible. We sitting here right now, what we do now will influence what that future will be like. And if the good Lord calls me, I don't want to have to explain how I needed a rest. I can't do that. So I've got much work to do.
Wow. Well, Senator, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. You are indeed an ambassador for humanity, and you've left us with many words of wisdom, ideas and insights to contemplate. And we will do that because here at the Idaho Falls City Club, we're going to continue to probe the issue of race and related issues in the weeks and months ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, our time with State Senator Cherie Buckner-Webb has gone by too quickly. But Senator, thanks so much again for joining us. Remember, you'll be able to see this program posted on the City Club of Idaho Falls website, ifcityclub.com, and stay in touch with us for future programs. Again, thanks, Senator Buckner-Webb. Good day.
Good day.